You don't belong here, boy. Go fetch coffee for the real workers. The words cut through the morning air like a blade. Jamal Washington stood motionless as his clipboard crashed to the muddy ground, papers scattering like fallen leaves. The construction site fell silent except for the distant hum of machinery. Brad Kellerman, the senior site engineer, crossed his arms and smirked. His pristine uniform contrasted sharply with Jamal's worn work clothes. 12 crew members stopped their tasks to watch the humiliation unfold. Jamal bent down slowly, collecting the mud-stained papers with quiet dignity. A corner of expensive leather peeked from his back pocket, barely visible, easily missed. One worker discreetly pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the record button. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Brad's smirk widened as he savored the moment of dominance. Have you ever been judged by your appearance, only to prove everyone devastatingly wrong? 8 hours until the project deadline. The digital clock on the construction trailer blinked ominously as Brad Kellerman straightened his hard hat. He'd established dominance, but this was just the beginning. Real power meant grinding someone down completely. Washington! Brad's voice boomed across the site. Those porta-potties won't clean themselves. Get moving! Jamal gathered his papers without protest. The crew exchanged glances, some uncomfortable, others entertained by the morning's drama. This kind of treatment wasn't new on construction sites, but something felt different today. Are you serious? Whispered Carlos Martinez, a veteran electrician. Making the new guy do sanitation? Brad overheard. Problem, Martinez? Maybe you'd prefer an affirmative action boy here handling your electrical work instead? The racial slur hung in the air like toxic smoke. Several workers shifted uncomfortably, but nobody spoke up. Job security trumped moral courage on most days. Meanwhile, Derek Thompson, a junior engineer barely 2 years out of college, watched from behind his laptop. His stomach churned. This wasn't the construction industry he'd dreamed of joining. But speaking up against Brad meant career suicide. Jamal moved methodically toward the sanitation area, his movements deliberate and calm. Too calm. Most people would have stormed off or fought back by now. Instead, he pulled out his phone. Yeah, it's me, Jamal said quietly into the device. The inspection is definitely happening today. Everything's proceeding as planned. His tone carried an odd authority that made Derek pause. Who was Jamal calling? And why did he sound like someone giving orders rather than receiving them? 6 hours until final inspection. The morning escalated when Tyler Jenkins, a 22-year-old apprentice, started filming. His TikTok account had gained minor construction industry fame with behind-the-scenes content. This looked like gold. Check this out, Tyler whispered to his phone camera. Racist supervisor totally humiliating this black worker. This is exactly what's wrong with construction. He hit share before thinking twice. The algorithm worked fast. Within 30 minutes, the video had 500 views. Within an hour, 5,000. Comments poured in. This is disgusting. What company is this? Someone needs to expose this supervisor. I'm sharing this everywhere. Brad remained oblivious to the digital storm brewing. He was too busy enjoying his power trip. Washington, when you're done with sanitation, sweep the debris from Zone C. And do it right. I'll be checking. Jamal nodded silently. As he walked past the tool station, his worn jacket shifted slightly. Derek caught a glimpse of something that made his engineering mind pause. A first-class airline boarding pass tucked into an expensive leather portfolio. Who was this guy? 4 hours until city inspection. The viral video reached 50,000 views. Local construction workers began recognizing the site, the luxury hotel renovation project downtown. Someone identified the company. Morrison and Associates, a mid-tier firm with city contracts worth millions. Janet Reeves, the project manager, received 3 phone calls before noon. The first from corporate HR, the second from their biggest client, the third from a local news station. We have a situation, she told Brad, shoving her phone in his face. Your little power display is going viral. Brad squinted at the screen, watching himself humiliate Jamal in high definition. His face reddened, but not from shame, from anger. That little punk recorded me? Where's the camera policy enforcement? Brad, focus. This video has been shared 800 times in the last hour. The company's getting roasted in the comments. But Brad's ego couldn't process the magnitude of the problem. In his mind, this was about disrespect and hierarchy. Someone needed to learn their place. He stormed across the site toward Jamal, who was methodically documenting something in an expensive moleskin notebook. The kind corporate executives used, not construction workers. You think you're smart, getting your buddy to film me? Brad's voice carried across the entire site. Let me show you what happens to troublemakers. Jamal looked up from his notes with unnaturally calm eyes. I'm just doing my job, sir. The respectful response somehow made Brad angrier. He wanted a fight, a reason to justify his next move. Your job? Boy, your job is whatever I say it is. And right now, I'm saying you're done here. Brad pulled out his radio. Security to the main site. Need someone escorted off the premises. The crew gathered in a loose circle, phones out, everyone recording now. This was about to get interesting. Maria Santos, the site safety inspector, had been watching from her trailer. She'd seen enough workplace discrimination to recognize the pattern. Her own recording device captured everything from a perfect angle. As security approached, Jamal made another phone call. This time, his voice carried clearly across the construction site. Yes, initiate Phase 2. It's time. Derek Thompson felt his engineering instincts tingling. Phase 2 of what? And why did Jamal's voice sound like someone who gave orders to people much more important than construction site security? The pieces weren't adding up. The expensive notebook, the first-class ticket, the authoritative phone calls, the unnatural calm under extreme pressure. Either Jamal was an incredible actor or everyone had massively underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. 2 hours until the truth changes everything. 2 hours until final inspection. The security guards arrived like vultures sensing carrion. 2 burly men in yellow vests, radios crackling, eyes scanning for the problem employee. That's him, Brad pointed at Jamal with theatrical authority. Disrupting productivity, filming without permission, insubordination, get him off my site. The crowd of workers pressed closer, phones held high. This wasn't just workplace drama anymore. It was digital content gold. The original TikTok video had exploded to 200,000 views, spawning dozens of reaction videos and commentary threads. LinkedIn posts began circulating in construction industry groups. A project manager from Seattle shared the video with the caption, "This is why our industry struggles with diversity. Disgusting behavior from Morrison and Associates." The post gained traction fast. Industry professionals began commenting with their own discrimination stories. Morrison and Associates' corporate social media mentions spiked, none of them positive. Meanwhile, Janet Reeves watched her phone with growing horror. The company stock ticker showed a 2.3% pre-market drop. Her boss had already called twice. The client was reassessing their partnership. But Brad remained focused on his immediate power play, oblivious to the corporate earthquake building around him. "Sir, you need to come with us." The lead security guard addressed Jamal with practiced politeness. Most workers submitted quietly at this point. Jamal stood slowly, brushing dirt from his pants. His movements remained eerily calm, methodical. He tucked his expensive notebook carefully into his jacket pocket, right next to that mysterious leather portfolio. "I understand your position," Jamal replied, "but I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." His tone carried something that made the security guards pause. Authority. The kind of quiet confidence that came from real power, not the borrowed authority of a mid-level supervisor. Brad sensed the hesitation and exploded. "No misunderstanding, this boy needs to learn respect." He stepped closer to Jamal, close enough that their hard hats nearly touched. "Some people need to know their place." The crowd went silent. This was crossing lines even for Brad's standards. 90 minutes until everything changes. The viral video reached new heights, 500,000 views across multiple platforms. Someone had identified Morrison and Associates in the comments. Others were posting the company's client list, phone numbers, and executive contact information. A local news station dispatched a crew. The reporter, Angela Martinez, had built her career covering workplace discrimination. This story had everything: viral video evidence, racial dynamics, corporate accountability. Her news van pulled up just as Brad made his biggest mistake yet. "You think hiding behind cameras makes you tough?" Brad chest-bumped Jamal, a clear assault captured by 17 different phones. "This is what happens when people don't know their place." Jamal absorbed the contact without moving backward. His feet stayed planted, his expression unchanged. Most people would have either fled or fought back. Instead, he pulled out his phone again. "Phase 3 is authorized," he said quietly. "Yes, I have everything documented." Derek Thompson watched from 20 feet away, his engineering mind racing. Phase 3? This sounded like military or corporate terminology. Who was Jamal really talking to? The junior engineer noticed other details the crowd missed. Jamal's work boots, expensive, custom-fitted. His watch, briefly visible when his sleeve shifted. Titanium, probably worth more than Derek's monthly salary. And the way Jamal held himself. Despite the humiliation, despite the physical aggression, he maintained perfect posture. Like someone accustomed to boardrooms, not construction sites. 60 minutes until the reveal. Maria Santos had seen enough. As the official site safety inspector, she had authority to intervene. But her real motivation was personal. She'd faced similar discrimination as one of the few Latina women in construction management. "Mr. Kellerman," she called out, her voice cutting through the crowd noise, "I need to document this incident for my safety report." Brad spun around, his face flushed with adrenaline and anger. "Stay out of this, Santos. This is about discipline and respect." "This is about federal workplace safety regulations," Maria replied calmly, "and potential Title VII violations." The mention of federal law made Janet Reeves's blood run cold. Title VII. Workplace discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. If this incident qualified, the company faced massive fines and federal oversight. But Brad was too deep in his power trip to recognize the legal minefield he'd entered. "Federal violations? This punk was insubordinate. I've got every right to maintain order on my site." "Your site?" Jamal spoke for the first time in several minutes. His voice carried a strange amusement that made everyone pause. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Something about the way Jamal said, "your site," suggested he knew something Brad didn't. 45 minutes until the world shifts. The news crew finished setting up. Angela Martinez approached the crowd with her cameraman in tow. This was live television now. Whatever happened next would reach thousands of viewers immediately. "Excuse me. I'm Angela Martinez from Channel 7 News. We're investigating reports of workplace discrimination at this construction site." Brad's face went white. Live television meant no controlling the narrative, no corporate spin. But his ego couldn't let him back down now, not in front of the crew he'd spent years dominating. "This is private property," he stammered. "You can't just—" "Actually, this is a public works project funded by city contracts," Angela interrupted smoothly. "Which makes it very much our business." Jamal made another phone call, this one longer than the others. Derek Thompson strained to hear the conversation. "Yes, the media is here. Perfect timing. Initiate the final phase." Final phase? Derek's mind raced. This was starting to sound like Jamal had orchestrated the entire situation. The security guards looked increasingly uncomfortable. What had started as a simple employee removal was now a federal discrimination case being broadcast live to thousands of viewers. "Sir," the lead guard addressed Brad, "maybe we should call this off until—" "No!" Brad's voice cracked with desperation. I'm the senior engineer on this project. What I say goes. He turned back to Jamal with wild eyes. You think your little social media stunt scares me? You're nobody, a temporary hire. I've been building things since before you were born. Jamal nodded thoughtfully, as if considering Brad's words. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, passed the notebook, passed the boarding pass, and pulled out his leather portfolio. The crowd pressed closer. Phones focused. The news camera zoomed in. Whatever was in that portfolio was about to change everything. Mr. Kellerman, Jamal said quietly, his voice carrying impossible authority. I think it's time we had a proper introduction. 30 minutes until the truth destroys everything Brad thought he knew. 30 minutes until everything Brad knows gets destroyed. The leather portfolio opened with a soft click that somehow carried across the entire construction site. The crowd pressed closer, phones straining to capture whatever was inside. Angela Martinez positioned her cameraman for the perfect angle. Jamal's movements remained methodical, unhurried. He pulled out a laminated identification card first, holding it at chest level where the cameras could focus. Brad squinted at the card, his brain struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. The seal looked official. City government official. But the details were too small to read from his distance. What kind of game are you playing? Brad's voice cracked slightly. Something in Jamal's demeanor had shifted. The quiet worker was gone, replaced by someone who carried himself like he owned the world. No games, Mr. Kellerman. Jamal's voice had changed too. Gone was the deferential tone, the careful respectfulness. This voice belonged to someone accustomed to being obeyed. Just a very thorough inspection. He pulled off his muddy work shirt with deliberate precision. Underneath was a crisp white dress shirt, perfectly pressed, with French cuffs and expensive cufflinks. The transformation was startling, like watching Clark Kent become Superman. The crowd murmured with confusion and anticipation. Derek Thompson felt his engineering mind click into overdrive. The expensive accessories, the authoritative phone calls, the perfect posture, all the pieces were forming a picture that defied belief. Tyler Jenkins kept his phone camera focused on the unfolding drama. His original TikTok video had exploded to 1.8 million views. Comments flooded in faster than he could read them. This was becoming one of the biggest viral moments of the year. Carlos Martinez nudged his coworker. Something ain't right about this whole situation. That dude's too calm, too prepared. Yeah, whispered Jake Sullivan, a concrete foreman. Most people would have cracked by now. This guy's like he's been expecting this exact scenario. Jamal straightened his tie and looked directly at Brad. Allow me to properly introduce myself. Jamal Washington, Chief Building Inspector for the City Planning Department. The words hit the construction site like a physical blow. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Phones froze in shocked hands. Even the distant machinery seemed to quiet down. Brad's face went through a spectacular transformation. Confusion, to recognition, to absolute terror. The color drained from his cheeks as the implications crashed over him like a tsunami. That's impossible, Brad stammered. You were cleaning... I was conducting an undercover workplace discrimination audit, Jamal continued calmly. He pulled out official documentation from his portfolio, city letterhead, official seals, legal terminology that made Janet Reeves's hands shake. Standard procedure for sites with multiple discrimination complaints. The crew began connecting dots at light speed. The mysterious phone calls weren't to friends. They were to city officials. The expensive accessories weren't stolen or borrowed. They belonged to someone with real authority. The unnatural calm under pressure wasn't weakness. It was professional training. Maria Santos stepped forward, her own documentation ready. I've been recording everything for the official report, Inspector Washington. Every word, every action, every federal violation. Derek Thompson's mind raced through the morning's events with new understanding. The way Jamal had examined the construction blueprints when he thought no one was looking. The technical questions he'd asked about structural integrity. The detailed notes in that expensive moleskin notebook. He hadn't been learning the job, he'd been inspecting it. Holy shit, Derek whispered to himself. He's been evaluating our work this entire time. Angela Martinez seized the moment, her reporter instincts in overdrive. Inspector Washington, can you tell our viewers what you discovered during your undercover investigation? Jamal turned to face the camera with the practiced ease of someone comfortable with media attention. What I discovered, Miss Martinez, is a pattern of systematic workplace discrimination that violates federal civil rights statutes. He pulled out a thick folder from his portfolio. The document was massive, hundreds of pages bound in official government folders. 47 documented incidents across 12 Morrison and Associates construction sites. Racial slurs, discriminatory job assignments, hostile work environment creation, and retaliation against minority employees who file complaints. The numbers hit like hammer blows. Janet Reeves grabbed her phone, speed dialing corporate headquarters. Her hands shook as she waited for someone to answer. This was beyond crisis management. This was company-ending catastrophe. But Jamal wasn't finished. He pulled out additional documentation that made the crowd gasp audibly. We have audio recordings from 17 different sites, he continued. Video evidence from 12 incidents. Witness statements from 43 current and former employees, and comprehensive financial analysis showing systematic pay disparities based on race. Brad felt the world spinning around him. This wasn't just about this morning's incident. This was about a comprehensive federal investigation that had been building for months, 20 minutes until the nuclear option. The security guards who'd come to escort Jamal off the site now found themselves in an impossible position. You don't manhandle a city inspector. You especially don't manhandle a city inspector conducting a federal discrimination investigation. Inspector, the lead guard said carefully, is there anything you need from us? Actually, yes. Jamal's smile was professional but cold. I need you to secure the site. No one leaves until I complete my documentation. This is now an active federal investigation scene. The implications rippled through the crowd. Active federal investigation meant potential criminal charges. It meant FBI involvement. It meant careers ending and people going to prison. Tyler Jenkins watched his phone notifications explode beyond comprehension. His video was being shared by celebrities, politicians, and civil rights organizations. #Justice. For Jamal was trending alongside #construction discrimination. The story was going national. Meanwhile, Derek Thompson was doing rapid calculations on his phone. Morrison and Associates employed 847 people across 15 construction sites. If the entire company went down, hundreds of families would lose their income. But the legal implications were even more staggering. Mr. Kellerman, I'm officially serving you with documentation of potential Section 1983 civil rights violations under federal law, Jamal announced, producing another official document. These carry penalties of up to $250,000 per incident, plus potential criminal prosecution under 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Brad's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The math was simple and terrifying. 47 incidents times $250,000 equaled over $11 million in potential fines. The criminal charges could mean prison time. Carlos Martinez shook his head in disbelief. Dude just went from cleaning toilets to potentially sending the boss to federal prison. That's some David and Goliath shit right there. The viral storm was beyond containment now. News outlets from 6 states were picking up the story. Morrison and Associates' corporate phones rang non-stop. Their stock price was in free fall on pre-market trading. Brad's world was crumbling in real time. The worker he'd humiliated for 3 hours held the power to destroy his career, his company, and potentially send him to federal prison. Look! Brad's voice was desperate now, all authority gone. We were just having some workplace banter. You know how construction sites are. It's rough humor, but it's not serious. Jamal consulted his expensive moleskin notebook. the one Brad had mocked earlier. At 7:47 a.m., you called me boy and told me I didn't belong here. At 8:15 a.m., you used the phrase affirmative action hire within earshot of 12 witnesses. At 9:23 a.m., you physically assaulted me while stating that I needed to know my place. Each timestamp was delivered with prosecutorial precision. Maria Santos nodded confirmation. Her recordings matched perfectly with Jamal's documentation. At 10:15 a.m., you attempted to have me illegally removed from a public works site during an official inspection. At 10:23 a.m., you made additional racial statements in the presence of news media. The precision was terrifying. Every moment had been documented, timed, and cataloged for federal prosecution. These aren't jokes, Mr. Kellerman. These are federal crimes captured on multiple recording devices and witnessed by dozens of people. 10 minutes until total corporate destruction. But Jamal held one more card, the nuclear option that would transform this from a discrimination case into something much bigger. "There's one more thing you should know," Jamal said, his voice cutting through the crowd's stunned silence. He pulled out a final document from his portfolio, heavier paper, embossed letterhead, the kind used for serious legal documents. Janet Reeves recognized the format and felt her stomach drop to her shoes. Corporate ownership documentation. Angela Martinez leaned forward with her microphone. The entire construction site held its breath. Even the distant traffic seemed to quiet down for this moment. Jamal held the document where the cameras could focus clearly. "I'm also a founding partner and 23% shareholder in Washington Construction Consortium." The words landed like a nuclear bomb. Derek Thompson's engineering calculator couldn't process the implications fast enough. "We hold $85 million in active city contracts," Jamal continued, his voice carrying across the silent construction site. "Morrison and Associates subcontracts 67% of their city work through our consortium. Contracts that include explicit morality clauses regarding workplace discrimination." Brad's legs finally gave out completely. He sat down hard on the concrete barrier, his face buried in his hands. The full scope of his catastrophic mistake was finally becoming clear. He hadn't just humiliated a random worker. He'd committed federal crimes against a city inspector who literally owned the contracts that kept his company alive. On camera, in front of witnesses, while being recorded for an official federal investigation. The crowd stood in stunned silence. This wasn't just workplace drama anymore. This was economic warfare being fought with federal law and corporate contracts. Jake Sullivan summed up what everyone was thinking. "That man just played the longest, smartest game I've ever seen." Brad never had a chance. As news vans surrounded the site and corporate lawyers speed-dialed their way to the biggest crisis in company history, one truth dominated everything else. Brad Kellerman had picked the absolute worst person in the world to humiliate. 48 hours to save the company or watch it die. The emergency board meeting convened in Morrison and Associates' glass-walled conference room at 2:30 p.m. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, executives could see protesters gathering on the sidewalk below. Signs read, "Justice for Jamal" and "End Construction Racism." CEO Richard Morrison sat at the head of the mahogany table, his usually perfect silver hair disheveled. The man who'd built a $47 million construction empire over 30 years now faced its potential destruction. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice strained, "we have exactly 46 hours and 23 minutes to present Inspector Washington with a comprehensive discrimination remediation plan. If we fail, we lose $85 million in city contracts." The numbers were devastating but precise. CFO Patricia Chen had spent 3 hours running calculations. Without the Washington Consortium contracts, we'd need to lay off 573 employees within 60 days. The company would be insolvent by Christmas. So, legal counsel David Nakamura pulled up the federal documentation on his laptop. The Section 1983 violations alone carry potential fines of $11.75 million. That's assuming we settle out of court. And if we don't settle? Morrison asked. Federal prosecution, criminal charges, prison time for Brad and potentially other supervisors. The company would face RICO investigation for systematic civil rights violations. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of protesters chanting outside. Meanwhile, Jamal Washington sat in his downtown office, reviewing the comprehensive audit report his team had compiled over 6 months. The investigation had been meticulous. Every incident documented, every witness interviewed, every financial disparity calculated. His assistant knocked on the door. Inspector, Channel 7 is requesting an exclusive interview. CNN wants to discuss the story on their evening broadcast, and the NAACP is asking about a joint press conference. Schedule the local interview for tomorrow morning, Jamal replied calmly. Tell CNN we'll consider it after Morrison and Associates responds to our ultimatum. And yes to the NAACP. This is bigger than one company. The viral video had exploded beyond anyone's imagination. 4.2 million views across all platforms. #construction accountability was trending in 12 countries. Civil rights organizations were calling it a watershed moment for workplace discrimination. But Jamal's real power lay in the cold precision of legal documentation and economic leverage. 36 hours until the deadline. Morrison and Associates' crisis management team worked through the night. The company had hired Thornfield and Associates, the city's most expensive crisis PR firm, at $50,000 per day. We need concrete changes, not just promises, explained crisis manager Sandra Walsh. Inspector Washington isn't interested in apologies. He wants systemic reform with measurable outcomes, and the reforms they were drafting would fundamentally transform the company. Immediate changes. Zero-tolerance discrimination policy with first offense termination. Anonymous reporting app for workplace incidents. Body cameras for all supervisory personnel, mandatory weekly diversity training for entire workforce. Financial accountability. $2.5 million diversity scholarship fund for construction trades. $500,000 annual fund for discrimination prevention research. Quarterly independent audits by external civil rights firms. Performance bonuses tied to diversity metrics for all managers. Leadership. Restructuring, 40% minority representation in management by December 2026. External diversity officer with board-level authority. Victim compensation fund for documented discrimination cases. Public quarterly reports on diversity progress. Patricia Chen ran the numbers again. These reforms will cost us approximately $1.8 million annually, but losing the city contracts would cost us $23 million in the first year alone. The math was brutal but clear. Compliance was expensive, but bankruptcy was worse. 24 hours until Judgment Day. Brad Kellerman sat in his lawyer's office, facing the end of his career. The state engineering board had already initiated license suspension proceedings. Federal prosecutors were reviewing criminal charges. His 23-year construction career was over. The best we can hope for is a plea agreement, explained his attorney. Complete cooperation with the federal investigation, public apology, commitment to diversity education. How much prison time? Brad asked quietly. If we cooperate fully, maybe probation and community service. If we fight it, the lawyer shrugged. Federal judges don't like civil rights violations. Could be 18 months to 3 years. Meanwhile, the story continued growing. Major construction companies across the country were scrambling to review their own practices. The Department of Labor announced surprise audits of federal construction contractors. 3 governors called for legislative hearings on workplace discrimination in blue-collar industries. Derek Thompson had spent the day updating his resume. Word was spreading that Morrison and Associates might not survive this crisis, but he'd also been thinking about Jamal's methodical approach to systemic change. He didn't just want revenge, Derek told his girlfriend over dinner. He wanted to fix the entire industry. That's why he documented everything so carefully. 12 hours until the final confrontation. Jamal arrived at Morrison and Associates headquarters at exactly 9 o'clock a.m., carrying the same leather portfolio that had started everything. The lobby was packed with reporters, protesters, and nervous employees. The elevator ride to the executive floor was silent except for the mechanical hum of ascending floors. Jamal's expression remained calm, professional, unreadable. The conference room was packed. Morrison and his entire executive team sat on one side of the table. Jamal sat alone on the other side, flanked only by his legal counsel and a court reporter. "Inspector Washington," Morrison began, "we've prepared a comprehensive response to your requirements." Patricia Chen distributed bound copies of their 89-page remediation plan. The document was impressive: detailed timelines, specific budget allocations, measurable outcomes, legal accountability measures. Jamal read through the entire document in silence, occasionally making notes. The room waited in tense anticipation. Finally, he looked up. "This is a good start, Mr. Morrison, but it's missing the most important element." "Which is?" "Personal accountability." Jamal's voice carried the quiet authority that had dominated the construction site. "Mr. Kellerman violated federal law. He assaulted me. He created a hostile work environment for dozens of minority employees." He pulled out another document from his portfolio. "I want his complete termination, forfeiture of pension benefits, and cooperation with federal prosecution, non-negotiable." Morrison glanced at his legal team. They nodded grimly. Brad was expendable if it saved the company. "Agreed," Morrison said. "Additionally, I want you to establish a $50,000 scholarship fund in honor of every minority employee who filed discrimination complaints that your company ignored over the past 5 years. That's 37 scholarships." The math was staggering: $1.85 million in scholarship funds alone. But Morrison nodded. "Agreed." Jamal stood and extended his hand. "Then we have a deal, Mr. Morrison. Your company gets to survive. The construction industry gets a model for real change, and hopefully no other worker will face what I experienced yesterday." As they shook hands, flashbulbs popped outside the conference room windows. The agreement would be front-page news by evening. Brad Kellerman's career was over, but an entire industry was about to change forever. 6 months later, the transformation was undeniable. Morrison and Associates had become an unlikely model for the construction industry. The WorkWatch app they'd developed logged over 12,000 downloads from construction companies nationwide. Discrimination reports had dropped 89% across their 15 job sites. The monthly diversity training sessions, initially met with eye rolls and resistance, had evolved into genuine conversations about inclusion and respect. Derek Thompson, promoted to senior project manager, often led these sessions with personal stories about witnessing discrimination and choosing silence. "The old way wasn't just wrong," he told a packed training room. "It was stupid business. We were throwing away talent because of prejudice." The scholarship fund had already changed lives. Keisha Williams, a single mother from Atlanta, was enrolled in her second semester of construction management thanks to the Brad Kellerman Memorial Scholarship, a name that served as a permanent reminder of the consequences of discrimination. Maria Santos had been promoted to Director of Workplace Safety, overseeing the implementation of reforms across all Morrison sites. Her quarterly reports showed measurable progress: workplace incidents down 67%, employee satisfaction up 43%, productivity increased by 12%. But the most dramatic change was in company culture. Workers who'd previously stayed silent now reported incidents immediately. The anonymous reporting system had logged 247 complaints in 6 months, not because discrimination had increased, but because people finally felt safe speaking up. The ripple effects extended far beyond one company. The federal investigation had expanded to include 12 major construction firms. The Department of Labor announced new mandatory diversity requirements for all federal contractors. 3 states passed legislation requiring anti-discrimination training for construction workers. Angela Martinez had won a regional Emmy for her coverage of the story. Her follow-up documentary, Building Change, the Jamal Washington story, aired on CNN to 2.8 million viewers. The film featured interviews with dozens of minority construction workers sharing their own experiences with workplace discrimination. Tyler Jenkins, the apprentice whose TikTok video started everything, had become an advocate for workplace equality. His construction industry TikTok account now had 800,000 followers. He used his platform to highlight positive changes and call out discrimination when he witnessed it. "One video changed everything," he often said in interviews. "Imagine what we could accomplish if everyone started recording injustice instead of ignoring it." Brad Kellerman's reckoning was swift and complete. The State Engineering Board permanently revoked his license. Federal prosecutors accepted his guilty plea to civil rights violations, sentencing him to 18 months probation and 500 hours of community service teaching diversity workshops. His public apology video, required as part of the settlement, had been viewed 3.2 million times. The comments section served as a harsh but necessary education in accountability. "I let my prejudices destroy my career and hurt people who deserved better," Brad read from his prepared statement. "I hope my mistakes can teach others what hate really costs." The community service was deliberately chosen to maximize impact. Brad spent his weekends teaching anti-discrimination workshops at construction trade schools, facing rooms full of young workers who'd all seen the viral video. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd tried to humiliate a black inspector was now being educated by the very communities he'd discriminated against. The industry transformation accelerated beyond expectations. Construction companies across the Southeast began adopting Washington protocols, the comprehensive anti-discrimination measures Jamal had negotiated. The protocols included mandatory body cameras for supervisors, anonymous reporting apps, and quarterly diversity audits. The National Association of Construction Contractors established the Jamal Washington Award for Excellence in Workplace Diversity. The first recipient was a small firm in Birmingham that had achieved 51% minority workforce through aggressive, inclusive hiring. Legal precedent was equally important. The Morrison and Associates settlement became a template for civil rights attorneys nationwide. Similar cases were filed in 8 states, all citing the Washington investigation as precedent. Construction worker unions, initially resistant to change, began embracing diversity initiatives after seeing the positive impact on workplace safety and job satisfaction. The Brotherhood of Electrical Workers launched a $10 million minority recruitment program. Personal transformation was the most powerful change of all. Jamal Washington had become a reluctant celebrity in civil rights circles. Speaking invitations poured in from universities, corporations, and government agencies. His methodical approach to systemic change inspired activists nationwide. "Real change requires patience, documentation, and strategic thinking," he told a Harvard Business School audience. "Anger is understandable, but lasting reform comes through legal precision and economic pressure." The construction site where everything began now featured a bronze plaque near the entrance. Washington Construction Consortium, Building Equality Through Excellence. It served as a daily reminder that dignity and respect weren't optional. They were foundational to good business. Workers passing the plaque often paused to read the inscription. Some pulled out phones to take pictures. The story had become legend, but the lessons remained practical and immediate. Change was possible. Justice was achievable. And sometimes, the quiet power of one person's courage could transform an entire industry. 2 years later, the legacy continues to grow. Jamal Washington stood before the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, preparing to deliver the keynote address for their annual Justice in Action conference. The auditorium was packed with 200 activists, lawyers, and everyday heroes who'd found inspiration in his methodical approach to systemic change. "Real power isn't loud," he began, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had stunned a construction site 2 years earlier. "Real power is prepared. It's documented. It's strategic. And most importantly, it's focused on creating lasting change, not temporary victories. The construction industry had undergone unprecedented transformation. The Washington Protocols were now federal requirements for all government contractors. Workplace discrimination complaints in construction had dropped 73% nationally. More importantly, minority enrollment in construction trades had increased 45%. These weren't just statistics, they were real-life stories. Touching stories of families lifted out of poverty through equal opportunity. Black stories of dignity restored and careers launched. Life stories that proved systematic change was possible when courage met preparation. Derek Thompson had founded his own construction firm, specializing in diversity-focused hiring and training. His company, Thompson Inclusive Construction, had grown to 200 employees, 68% of them minorities or women. The business model was simple: treat everyone with respect, focus on talent over prejudice, and watch productivity soar. Jamal didn't just change one company, Derek often told interviewers. He changed how an entire industry thinks about human dignity. Tyler Jenkins had parlayed his viral fame into a construction media empire. His YouTube channel, Building Better, featured success stories from minority contractors, safety innovations, and workplace equality advocacy. The channel had 2.3 million subscribers and had spawned a movement of young construction workers demanding better standards. Maria Santos had become the nation's leading expert on construction workplace safety and diversity. Her consulting firm helped companies implement Washington protocols across 12 states. The demand was so high she'd opened offices in 4 cities. The ripple effects extended globally. Construction companies in Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom had begun implementing similar reforms. The European Union announced new workplace equality requirements for construction contractors. The International Labor Organization cited the Washington case study in their Global Discrimination Prevention Guidelines. But the most powerful changes remained personal and immediate. James Rodriguez, a Latino electrician in Phoenix, used his phone to document discrimination at his job site. The video led to federal investigation, company reforms, and a $2.8 million settlement. "I remembered Jamal's story," James said. "Document everything. Stay calm. Let the evidence speak." Keisha Williams graduated summa cum laude from Construction Management School, funded by the scholarship program that arose from Brad Kellerman's downfall. She now manages diverse construction crews across Atlanta, carrying forward the principles of dignity and respect. Thousands of similar stories played out across the country. Workers who'd once suffered in silence now had tools, legal precedent, and most importantly, hope that change was possible. The movement continues growing. Angela Martinez published a best-selling book about the case titled Quiet Power: How One Man's Courage Changed an Industry. All proceeds fund legal aid for workplace discrimination victims. The Jamal Washington Foundation, established with settlement money, provides legal resources and documentation training for workers facing discrimination. Their mobile app, Document and Report, has been downloaded 890,000 times across all industries. Brad Kellerman completed his community service but continued volunteering at diversity workshops. His transformation from perpetrator to educator offered hope that even the most hardened prejudices could change through education and accountability. "I destroyed my own life through hate," he told a recent workshop. "But maybe that destruction can help build something better for the next generation." Your voice matters in this continuing story. Have you witnessed workplace discrimination? Have you stayed silent when you should have spoken up? Have you seen injustice and wondered if one person can really make a difference? Jamal Washington proved that preparation, documentation, and strategic action can topple even the most entrenched systems of discrimination. But lasting change requires all of us to act. Share your experiences in the comments below. Document workplace injustice when you see it. Support businesses that prioritize equality and dignity for all workers. Subscribe to the Black Voices Speak channel for more stories of courage, transformation, and justice. Together, we can build a world where no one faces humiliation for the color of their skin. Because real change starts with real people telling real stories. Your story could be next.